All right, I guess we can go and get ahead and get started. Everybody's here. Do we have any public comment? All right, we will proceed. First item on our agenda is action on purchases. Can I get a motion? Actually, do we have any questions for? Can I get a motion to support sending the action item of purchases on to the full board?
So moved.
Support.
Anyone have any? All in? Aye.
Aye.
Aye, all right. Moving on. West Leonard Elementary cell resolution. We might have some questions about this. So can you just tell us about the school itself?
Good afternoon, Dr. Baker and committee members. As you know, we've had several empty buildings that the district has had over the years, and we do not actively market them. From time to time, we do get unsolicited offers. We did on West Leonard actually a couple of them, and we're asking for you to send a resolution of the full board next month to accept an offer for the West Leonard property. I'll let Ken talk about it. He was involved in the negotiations and has some additional information for you.
Well, and just to be clear, we don't negotiate, since we don't market the properties, and we did receive multiple offers, we don't try and bid them against each other, we just evaluate and make a recommendation. So what we're bringing to you is actually chronologically the first offer that we received. The first two came the same day, so and were the same price. We did have our attorney help review them to see if there were any substantial differences, and there were not. So we are recommending the offer from Cherry Street Capital. Their intent is to keep the building as is on the exterior and convert it to multifamily housing. Let me read their words. Our thoughts for the West Leonard would be to redevelop the building for multifamily, utilizing the existing structure and site, and create a project that contributes to the neighborhood in a positive way. I did ask them if they considered that affordable or anything. How they did not define it as affordable, but their definition of affordable was seeking federal tax credits or federal funding to help with that. The way they described it verbally was market rate. It will not be high-end. The finishes would be so that they can market it similar to the neighborhood. That's the extent of the definition I received. It is at appraised value. The appraisal was done a year ago, February. And all after we evaluated the first two, we actually got two others submitted that we turned back. One was an option, and the other was an offer, but we had already evaluated and made the recommendation to put in the packet, so we didn't even look at those any further than to acknowledge that we'd received them. So 3 of the 4 were actually all the same dollar amount at appraised value, and felt based on chronology and the validity of this offer was best to recommend this one.
Good.
Yeah, questions?
I don't know. Do we have any information with respect to this company, their track record in the community? I mean, not that that is the most important of bearing, but tried to do a little research before I came, couldn't find much on them.
We don't have a lot of background on them either, and if that's something that the board desires, we can do that before action takes place.
I was just curious because certainly there are those companies in the community with long track records of engaging in certain types of projects. So that's my curiosity.
We can certainly, if this moves forward to the board, we can have them present to share their history in front of the full board.
Yeah. I was also curious while I had the floor. Do we have any gauge on the amount of money that we've spent in repairs during the course that we've had that building closed? Say last 3 years.
Not specifically, but typically it costs us between $30,000 and $50,000 a year to keep a closed building functioning. And that doesn't get into significant repairs. That's just normal operation and maintenance, heat. We keep the heat on, we keep the security systems functioning. So our repairs, typically if we have break-ins, we're gonna have to fix windows. I can tell you there's a fair amount of work that, if we were to reopen, would be needed at that building. But, you know, it's a 1920s structure. Certain pieces of it, the inside is better than the outside. If you go in, the hardwood floors can be cleaned up very easily to look brand new. Some of the brickwork, it does need masonry work on the outside. I'm not sure how they'll divide it. A typical classroom is probably too small for a single apartment. But I'm not sure how they'll divide it up.
And then you indicated that the appraisal was done in February. That was this past February?
February of 16.
Of 16. So about a year and a half ago. Any impact with respect to values during that time, rising? I mean, I know we've seen some rises in our neighborhood, and I just am curious whether that appraisal is still relevant today.
If we redid it, the appraisal would change. It's our feeling that it wouldn't change significantly compared to what it would cost us to do another appraisal.
My first view of that number, I just felt, wow, that's a very inexpensive building. And I've been in that building before, but it's been some time, and I understand. It's looking at property values and what we have as assets in the district.
The other thing I should note is the purchase agreement does reference that we'll have to have an easement so we can maintain the cell tower lease. So that will stay with us. That is not part of the sale. Whether that's just an easement to get in and out, or we actually carve out the cell tower square footage is yet to be determined. And then it does also reference the board's right of first refusal if they change their proposed use.
Okay, so I have several background questions. One is, when did we stop using West Leonard as a school?
At the start of the transformation plan.
So it's 5 years ago. Okay. And the assessment on the likelihood of it being a school in the future, in terms of likelihood of us ever having a need to put a school in that neighborhood?
Very slim. We internally have no plans, nor have it ever come up as a discussion item, the potential of reopening.
Christian?
And I'm sorry, I probably should know this, but the students in those neighborhoods will attend which school then? Which school will those students attend?
Depending on the north side of Leonard, they would most likely attend Harrison or be in the Frost attendance boundary.
Gotcha.
Typically, we try not to cross major streets. If they did, we'd be looking at, on the south side of Leonard, Shawmut and Stocking.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Also, the couple things that you said. One is, you said that this is just background for any new board members, because it has been a while since I remember a school changing hands, but we don't have schools on the market. They're just there for prospective future use, and then people approach us about whether or not we're interested in something.
We get calls all the time.
Okay.
We don't put them on the market to make sure that the board always has the option to say no. There are some state rules and laws that if we do list them with a broker come into play, and we want to stay away from those.
Sure.
So since it's not marketed, we have no broker, unsolicited, it's totally up to the board to accept or reject any offer. We want to keep that in play. West Leonard, we haven't had a lot of interest. Other buildings, we've had interest continually and yet no offers. So it depends on, a lot of variable factors.
And so what does right of first refusal mean?
If they change the use, so if they decided to make it a car wash, although there's one next door, or sold it to a parochial school or something else, they change it from their stated use, the board has the option to buy it back, and it describes how the price would be derived. That you have the right to take it back as their first option before they can change use or sell it.
Okay, so that would mean, do we have to have a reason for buying it back? We don't have, because we,
No.
okay,
It depends totally on their change of use.
okay. So we're doing it because we're presuming that we're in concert with the needs of the community. We're selling this because it could be a good use to the community, and they change it to a car wash,
Or
you know, or something
something
else.
that's undesirable.
Okay, then we could say, no, we'll take it back. Okay.
That's correct.
And
So
part-
that does not follow with the law of the broker, where if we had it on the market.
I'm not sure how that would fit, but probably not. And the board has always had in their policies that any property sale, a major consideration is the use of the property, to be compatible with the neighborhood and not do anything that either diminishes or is offensive to neighbors. We've done that always. It's been the past 3 or 4 years that the right of first refusal was developed and added in.
So then, with that in mind, how do we get a sense from the community what their thoughts are about this sale?
By policy, we need to hold, we need to hold a public information meeting, although it's quite limited. I think it's a property owner within 300 feet, and invite them and tell them what's going to happen, and see what their reaction is. And we would bring that, it's difficult to do before we present to this body, but we would intend to bring it back before the full board acts with the minutes of those meetings and any comments that come up.
Okay. Any other questions?
No.
Can I get a motion to send this to the full board?
Support.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any noes?
No.
So that's 1 no and 3 ayes.
So I do have, it was mentioned earlier that if it was brought to the full board, that Cherry Street Capital, that we could possibly hear from them. So
Yeah.
that would happen.
Yes,
Okay.
we will require that.
Okay. And so are we going to request specific information when they come? Or what will we be asking them to present?
Their history, what they've done before.
And then specific plans
Yes,
for this
and
site?
if board members have specific questions, if they can get them to me a week ahead, before the next action, we can present them so they can respond to those specifically, we'll do that.
I would like to encourage our board to to look specifically at what we've invested in this building historically after its closing, and to update a fair market analysis, whether that's a formal appraisal by a qualified entity or it's an appraisal that we do. The other that I would encourage us to do is to solicit information from neighborhood association and other stakeholders to make sure that that there is some momentum and support for this. And then I think that we ought to look at how the downtown development of Grand Rapids has been developing, and whether or not our forecasting is on the mark for potential use or for potential growth and value of that property.
Okay.
So the next full board meeting is July 17, so prior to that, you'll hold this community outreach
If
meeting.
we can't get that scheduled, would hold the action to the following board meeting.
Perfect.
To make sure we can do that.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Okay, so it won't come to the full board
Well,
until
it's just-
you've had that meeting.
We should plan for July 17th.
Yep.
And if we, as staff, can't make that, everything happen in the meantime, we'll ask for that to be deferred.
Very good,
And you work that out with the superintendent's scheduling, okay?
thank you.
All right, May financial statements.
The May financial statements, we point to the financial dashboard. I will inform you that if you look at the financial dashboard, the 2017 annual budget now reflects the Amendment 2 that was approved earlier this month, and the projected fund balance as of the end of June of this year has also been updated to reflect the impact of Amendment 2. You may recall that reduce a fund balance minimum amount, Amendment 2. So other than that, we are tracking according to budget. I will remind you that there will not be a June financial statement as part of the Finance Committee. We wait until the audit is complete so we can provide you with an audited financial for the end of the year. So this will be your last interim financial statement until the audit is done. We made some closing adjustments and for June and for the year of 2016-17.
When does that tend to occur?
The audit is usually done in September and completed in October.
Does that come to the full, to
Yeah,
this
yeah.
committee first?
Yeah,
Okay.
yes. Yeah, it has to be filed with the state by the end of October, so.
Okay.
And then, as always, the additional detailed financial information follows the dashboard report for those that like to get into the details. Any questions on May financials?
Okay, warm, safe, and dry update.
Warm, safe, and dry, two projects ongoing. Ridgemore is well underway, moving along quite well. And then we are starting this week the gym roof replacement project at Central Innovation Center. Those are the two warm, safe, and dry. Moving on to
Is that's going to, that'll be something that we won't need to redo then when we get to Central's renovation? Okay.
And it includes some skylight work over that atrium next to the gym. It's the same roof, and the roof was to the point we have to do something.
All right. Bond update.
Bond, in the purchasing agenda were two items for Buchanan. One was the elevator and the other was the security system. Both of those we had to rebid for lack of bidders, but there were the estimate numbers in the summary form that we had before. So we're still within the same budget we had. That's moving on. We had hoped to give you at least a verbal report of the museum bids. We did delay those from last Thursday until tomorrow. We had a large addendum at the end, and we wanted to make sure the bidders had adequate time to do that. What we are requesting is the approval from this group to take those museum high school bids directly to the July 17th board on that purchase agenda.
Okay. So we will see that, so you'll explain that at the time, since it won't go through here.
We had the separate agenda for bond purchases anyway.
Right.
We'll continue that, and we can address it and answer any questions at that.
Okay. The final thing here is to find out about budget highlights. You have I know that you inserted a PowerPoint slides. Do you have that for the screen here?
I don't have the screen. I just will talk off the slides that you have if you can. I'll pull it up there. And if you looked at it ahead of time, the first three columns is what I presented I want to think now, back in May, I believe, after we had that Governor, House, Senate had weighed in. Then there was as you may recall, just by virtue of some little history, there was this disagreement between the governor and the House and Senate over MIPSR's reform, and so both the House and Senate conference committees went on their way to determine their own budgets after the May Revenue Estimating Conference did not invite the governor in because they didn't see eye to eye on MIPSR's. And so we, in fact, did get a conference settlement from the House and the Senate without the governor that was released a couple of weeks ago. And then the MIPSR's reform, and I'll talk about that and just want to get through this in just a minute here. They finally came to a resolution on the MIPSR's reform, and then there was some additional changes to the first conference report, and those changes came out last Tuesday. So what you have in front of you is a final highlights. Both the House and Senate passed the budget last week. It's awaiting the governor's signature, which he will do within the next couple of weeks. But you just turn there to a minute, turn to the handout here. First line foundation allowance ended up being $120 per student as opposed to the $100 we thought we were going to get under the 2X formula. So that'll add a little additional revenue to the 17-18 year. The high school student funding, the governor had proposed, and both the House and Senate did not, actually came back, and this was one of the last minute changes last Tuesday. So they provided $25 per high school student. At the end of the handout here, we'll look at the impact on the financials for us. Funds for declining enrollment districts, no changes there on the second conference committee. GSRP, no changes there. The at-risk funding, there were some changes there. They finally decided on a $120 million increase in funding for 31A, and they did include the out-of-formula and hold harmless districts will now be eligible for 31A dollars. However, theirs are limited to 30% of a full funding figure. Sort of the full funding figure might be for, like us, those hold harmless and out-of-formula districts will only get 30% of that. That's estimated additional $777 a student for us for fully funded districts. There also, in terms of provisions of 31A, you may recall the governor had proposed some new metrics, and that did not make it into the final bill. The 31A dollars still need to be used for third grade English language literacy, 8th grade math, regular attendance, and 11th grade college and career readiness. However, the measurement of how that's achieved will not change. It's still essentially going to be looking at test scores over the years and evaluate those particular areas based on the test scores. That'll happen it'll happen in the 18-19 school years when the state will start evaluating the effectiveness of spending those 31A dollars based on test scores and trying to achieve those goals. They've also set aside up to 3% of total 31A dollars that could be used for some professional development, specifically in multi-tier support services. So we're estimated to get about $9.2 million in 31A dollars. 3% of that's the neighborhood of $300,000 that we will be able to use for some additional professional development, which is always needed in the district here. So that is new this year. In prior years, none of the 31A dollars could be used for professional development. That's a positive. CTE in the next, on page 4 there, has been going all over the place, and they ended up at an additional $9.6 million for equipment upgrades. The whole total program is funded at about $36.7 million, which is unchanged from the prior year. The shared time reduction did not make it through, fortunately. There is a $2 million reduction, but that's related to the maximum FTE they will pay for a shared time student is 0.75, as I think I mentioned. at some point. Our shared time FTEs are generally in the range of 0.2, 0.3. We do not have any FTEs in the shared time program that are even approach 0.75. So our funding should not be impacted in the 17-18 year. First Robotics came in at 2.8 million, a little more than the governor proposed, a little bit less than the Senate proposed. The data analytics tool, they came into a categorical, I think, 2 years, or in the second year. That's funded again in the third year for 1.5 million. The MIPSers is still an anticipated increase based on the increase in normal cost by virtue of the reduction of return on assets from 8% to 7.5%. There is additional dollars the state's provided to limit that increase to 0.62%. Then the last page, page five, you'll see some of the MIPSers impact the budget. The 147A payment, which has been in place for a few years now, at $100 million, was again funded at $100 million. The rate cap, $960 million. And then the 147E UAAL payment is new. I think I mentioned in one of the updates that both the House and Senate were holding back some dollars for MIPSers reform, for tax reduction, who knows what. And so they took some of that held back dollars, $200 billion of it, to pay down the unfunded amount. They call it the MIPSers debt, but it's really the unfunded liability. So $200 million. So as you can see, there's, $1.2, $1.3 million going into the retirement system this year from either the general fund or the school aid fund, in addition to what we as school districts are paying in on our percent of payroll every month. Special ed remained the same at 1.4 million. Cyber school funding, the reduction that the governor saw did not happen, so they are getting the full foundation allowance. Itinerant funding stayed at $2 million, which is what came through this year for us, which was good. And then the last line there, I just added for your information. This budget this year, a record $630 million is being used for higher ed funding out of the school aid fund. $630 million. That approximates about $450 per student that we don't get because the general fund can't fund what they want to fund at higher ed, and so it comes to the school aid fund. So that continues to be an issue with this administration, using what everyone believed to be K through 12 funding dollars and putting them into higher ed. We could do a lot with additional $450 per student. So then the last page is, again, just a summary of where in general terms, where I think we're going to come out based on our budgeted enrollment, which was 16,926 for 17-18. Foundation allowance, just over $2 million in new revenue. That high school funding, about $84,000. At risk, $1.6 million approximately. Early middle college, our new program this year, I threw in a $50,000 bogey. So almost $3.8 million in new funding from the state, and then that MIPSers increase of $600,000, which we can quantify. And so net neighborhood of $3.2 million. And if we achieve our budgeted enrollment, and if all these estimates that came from state and House fiscal agency turn out in terms of the impact of particular 31A funding. So any questions on, clearly as I mentioned to Dr. Baker, we met last week, clearly we will bring a amendment one to you, again, probably in January timeframe. We'd like to wait till we get the fall count in and have that certified, which happens in late November. So that amendment one will at the very least reflect our enrollment and some of these additional dollars that were not in the original budget that came after we had approved the budget last week. So that's where it stands in terms of the school aid budget. Now, the MIPSers,
Actually, before you,
yeah.
so when you were estimating the budget for next year, the numbers that we approved last
Yes.
week, what was that prospect for new revenue based on? I mean, how much?
That was based on essentially the House version, if you will.
So the 2.7.
2.7 million approximately.
So it's about,
Although not all that at-risk funding was in there, so it was more in the neighborhood of 2 million probably.
okay, so then, at this point, so it looks like we have potentially an extra million than we were planning, but at this point, the budget is gonna stay the same. There's no new expenses, it'll just be reflected in hopefully an increased fund balance that we'll know in January.
Yeah, again, the at-risk funding on its surface, you spend what you get, so that doesn't have an impact on,
that's true.
on fund balance. So, there's the unrestricted dollars is a difference in the, 336,000, the foundation allowance, the 84,000 in the high school funding. So those are the, it's the neighborhood of, $2.2 million compared to 1 point, so it's maybe a $500,000 increase in
Okay.
unrestricted dollars.
Okay,
Again, based on achieving the budget enrollment we had,
okay.
so. Okay? Things are a little muddier when it comes to MIPSers reform, and Rusty was at the work session a couple of weeks ago and tried to explain, and it's still, that the bill is already passed and is waiting to be signed by the governor, and the provisions in the bill are one thing. The implementation is much more mysterious. There is a lot of wording in the actual bill that gives a lot of latitude to the ORS board and the treasurer, but generally speaking, come February 1st, 2018, all new school district employees will automatically default to a 401k type defined contribution plan. And the plan will mirror the state's plan. So there's a 4% contribution to all employees on the top, and that'll be funded by the school districts, all right? And then there is an additional 3% they'll actually be funded for the first 2 years out of the school aid fund to match an employee's contribution of 3%. So it's a one-for-one match up to 3%. All current employees, like myself, who are in the defined contribution plan, will automatically go into that new defined contribution plan actually this fall as opposed to February. So currently, the defined contribution plan for employees who chose it is the employee has to put in 6% to get a total of 9%. The new plan would be that the employee needs to put in 3% to get a total of 10%. So it is a much better plan. The hybrid plan will still exist under the new legislation. That, for those that don't want the defined contribution plan, they have to make the choice to go into the hybrid plan. The hybrid plan is changed. It'll be more costly to an employee who chooses that. Essentially, it'll be a 50-50 cost sharing between the employer and the employee. There's provisions in the bill that say if the hybrid plan is less than 85% funded for 2 consecutive years and the legislature chooses not to fund it to 85%, the hybrid plan will go away, and the only choice will be the defined contribution plan. There are also some provisions in this bill that impact the current legacy plan, one being that the normal cost percent cannot be any less than the prior year. So normal cost, there's an actuarial computation every year, and based on all the actuarial assumptions, which include return on assets and retirements and deaths, all those kinds of things, that normal cost from year to year, the percentage we're paying on payroll can go up or down, and it has gone up and down. It'll no longer be able to go down. So there'll be a floor, and the floor will be the 17-18 year we're going into now. And so after 17-18 year, it can only go up, it can never go down. Could stay the same, but it can't go down like it does now.
What- You mean the percent of each,
Percent of payroll, it goes to the normal cost portion of it,
which is like, is that now about?
and hang on a second, okay. Yeah, currently, the pension normal cost for our most popular plan is 4.35% of payroll. And that's actually for next year, so that will be the floor, 4.35%. It'll never go below that going forward unless legislation change. They also did the same thing with the unfunded liability percent. That is being set at a minimum too. Well, there's actually a bit of a computation, but essentially that can't go down from year to year. That'll stay at a certain rate until it's paid out, paid off completely, which is now projected to happen in 21 years or 25 years now. Currently, that UAL amount there is about a 15% of payroll amount that we have to pay. Then there's an additional stabilization rate of 11.32%. That's part of that 147A funding, so we pay it in. The state essentially reimburses us through our state aid. So our net impact right now, the UAAL, is about 15%. So what's not clear in the bill, and I looked at it again, and no one's really quite sure, is whether or not that minimum rate is the 15% or if it actually includes the stabilization rate, which gets it up to 26%. I don't know what again, the 147A funding is a categorical. They could take that away from us at any point in time. So there appears to be, and there's also a different method of computing the payroll amount on which all these contribution rates are determined. And they've introduced a concept called adjusted payroll, which essentially takes a district's payroll for the year and adjusts it by the increase in overall expenditures of the district in the prior year. So if you think about that intuitively, that will essentially artificially inflate that payroll amount that we have to pay our percentages on, which seems to me is going to be an increased cost to us. And in determining what that adjusted payroll looks like, that's where there's some leeway that the treasurer and the ORS board can. It doesn't really say how that's computed yet. It just they define what adjusted payroll is, but the actual computation of it left up to the ORS and the Treasury Department. So who knows what that might look like. So 17, 18, not likely to, it's not going to impact us from a cost perspective. 18, 19, it could, and going forward it could, in terms of additional cost to the pension plan than what we would be paying under the current plan. The other thing I need to mention, the defined contribution plan, I mentioned that 4% that we as a district will pay that. Right now, the maximum amount the district pays on a defined contribution plan is 3%. But they don't pay that unless the employee puts in 6%. The legislation remains silent to that. So right now, let's just say we're paying 3% for a defined contribution. The new plan's going to make us pay 4%. That additional 1%, the bill right now is silent as to, presumption is we're going to pay that 1% additional, not the school aid fund. Now, whether we get additional dollars, again, that's just not addressed. The 3% is addressed, matching for the first 2 years. After that, who knows? So, and if they actually close the hybrid plan down, as you all know, that's the intent, really, of the House and Senate, is to get rid of any kind of defined benefit plan that we currently have. The actual transition to that plan, for that plan completely in the future, who knows what that may may end up costing somebody. So there's a lot of uncertainty in what that looks like, but that bill
So,
is
but it's
passed.
likely, it sounds like likely, most of our employees are in the defined system, the pension system, right?
Benefit plan, correct.
So then, and we would pay a fixed percent of the total payroll towards pensions for that, for at least.
Well, it's
the
not
next
really,
21.
it's computed every year what that percent is. So again, the impact for us is going to be the normal cost can't go down.
Right, so that means fixed in terms of it's not going to
Yeah,
go down.
that's correct.
Which is, sounds like it's somewhere between 15 and 30%. So, right?
Right,
But-
well, right, yeah, I mean, right now, it's, the total we're paying is almost 37%, as I mentioned, 11% comes back to us, so it's going to be probably somewhere between, I don't know, 25 and 27% maybe,
Okay.
net.
And then the newer
Just a guess.
employees, either that are hybrid or that will go to this new.
Defined contribution, yeah.
Defined contribution, we would also pay the 4% of those persons, even though we're also essentially paying the 26% of their.
Yeah, for the first 2 years, it's just 4% cost to us as a district. The 3% matching the state will provide funds for. And again, if 3%'s max, if employee chooses not
So
to
then that
max out
200 million that was put into that, that's to cover the
unfunded
state's
liability, the
3%
old plan.
of the old plan, of the old
Just
plan, yeah, that's
additional
right, okay.
amounts to pay down that debt.
Oh, so there's no relief, okay.
No, there's no relief.
There's no relief for
No
this
relief
new
in the
one.
rates for that. No relief in the rates for that, no. All that does is maybe allow for that liability paid off a little bit earlier, but again, that all depends on market returns in the future. So, they have to have all this figured out by February, well, hopefully by February 1st when it happens. The other thing, obviously, we don't know is the impact on recruiting new teachers.
Right.
One of the concerns we had, as many of us had as districts, is just that it's been difficult to increase compensation over the years, and now the hard cap, more cost to our teachers, and now we've got a pension plan that seems not to be as good as what's been in the past, and whether that has an impact on our ability to recruit teachers and, more importantly, retain the good teachers remains to be seen. So
we should have an essay exam at the next board meeting, so. So, you should go into teaching there. Yeah. Because it's so crystal clear, it's like it just
and
goes down
again,
to all multiple choice answers, so.
we will certainly keep you informed as boards, as I said, as we see how this is going to be, the pension plan is going to be implemented going forward, because
Yeah, it'd be nice,
I've actually
yeah.
read the actual bill a couple of times, and even this morning, things were, fortunately, it's one of those things where the more you read, the more confused you become. So this is my best and even Rusty and Chris Glass at the county ISD, I've talked to them, and they're as confused as all of us. So, but yet our legislatures, some legislators who voted on it can figure it out. I don't think so. That's just my opinion.
That's the opinion of Larry Oberst. Not sure, because, okay, so, it would be nice at some point to have, once it's figured out, to actually have it, in very simple,
Yes.
it's not like we can impact it much, in terms of what Lansing does, but it would be nice to understand the implications for the wider budget. So it's always.
Absolutely.
So if we have, when we're looking at discretionary decisions,
Right.
this is quite a bit of our discretion is taken up
Yeah.
with this, so.
So the good news is the school aid budget was great for us. It was the best funding since I've been here. The other good thing is the pension bill should have no impact 17-18 year. Should
Yeah.
not have any significant impact. So that's good. So for the next 12 months, presumably we hit our enrollment numbers, it's things are more positive, but after that, who knows?
All right. Cool. Oh, sorry.
On other? Are we on other?
Oh, yeah, we can get to other. Okay, other. Sorry.
If we're all done with questions on.
I'd like to indulge the group and just recognize a youth leader that I have present with me today, is Marcos Flores, who's the president of the student council over at Wolf Middle School in Centerline, Michigan. He also happens to be my grandson visiting.
Oh.
Pretty proud of him.
Oh, okay, I guess, I was like, I thought he had public comment. He's welcome to, give you 3 minutes to say whatever you need to say.
You're good?
So,
All right, thank you.
Awesome. Welcome.
any other? All right, meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.